Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Folayan. Thank you for tuning in. We are at Artizen, Stories That Matter. For those of you that don't know me, I am Jennifer Folayan. I am Pueblo, Cherokee, and Aztec. I serve on the board of directors at the Baltimore American Indian Center. I currently live in Maryland. And I've been invited to be a keynote speaker at the Artizen Conference in South Africa. It's a conference for artists who are committed to social transformation. And I'm committed to sharing our stories. So I've been organizing different conversations across Turtle Island and to get a sense of perspective of what are our stories, what is there to share, and what's special about us as we celebrate every day. Today is a special day, and I have some special guests that I'd like to introduce. So first, I'd like to welcome Christine Shepard. Let me add Christine to the stream. Hi, Christine.
Hi there. How are you?
Good, thank you. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what neck of the woods are you from?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be with you all this evening. I'm Christine Shepard, a settler descendant from Ontario, Canada. Jennifer and I met through Dr. Amanda Kemp's Racial Justice from the Heart training program. I first became aware of the differences in the way Indigenous people were treated in Canada when I was about 20 years old at a summer camp. And I then went on to complete a Native Studies certificate because I was interested in knowing more about Native peoples, about what was going on in Canada. But that was just the beginning of my re-education. The more I learn every year, the more I realize how much I don't know. But now I'm in a position where I can bring people together to build empathy and understanding and dispel stereotypes about Canadian Indigenous peoples through teachings from Indigenous peoples. So in Canada, today marks the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This is a day to recognize and reflect on the tragic history and ongoing legacy of Canadian residential schools. It is also a day when we can honor residential school survivors, their families, and Indigenous communities. Over 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend Indian residential schools in Canada. 139 schools were set up across Canada. And so far, less than 10 of those have been searched for unmarked burials. And as you probably know, about 3,000 children have been found so far in these different parts of Canada near residential schools. This National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is an opportunity for people like myself, settler Canadians, to not only reflect on what we know, but also to take time to learn more. And there have been many physical and virtual events for people to attend in their respective communities. I heard stories from many friends with young children about what children were learning and doing in their classrooms today. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation came about through the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which provided those affected by the Indian residential school system with an opportunity to share their stories and experiences. Between 2007 and 2015, the Government of Canada provided funds to support the work of the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The TRC spent 6 years traveling to all parts of Canada and heard from more than 6,500 witnesses, which was actually less than 10% of the children who were forced to attend those schools. The TRC also hosted national events across Canada to engage the Canadian public, educate people about the history and legacy of the residential school system, and to share and honor the experiences of those former students and their families. In 2015, the TRC held its closing event in the national capital of Canada, Ottawa, and presented its findings to the Government of Canada. And included in that were 94 calls to action to further reconciliation between Canadians and Indigenous people, and to redress the legacy of residential schools. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is number 80 in the 94 calls to action.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate you sharing that important lead up to today's first official holiday in Canada. And as you mentioned, we both are training to be facilitators in racial justice from the heart. Another one of my team members going to South Africa, Jamie, is also involved in racial justice from the heart. And one thing that we've learned about holding these difficult conversations is to have that space, first of all, have that safe space to have these conversations. So would you mind leading us through a practice that we call holding space for transformation, please?
Sure, I'd be delighted to do that. So,
sorry. And for anyone out there, if you have smudge or anything that you would also like to use and to participate to create your space, feel free to do that as well. Thank you, Christine.
For sure. Now, let's prepare ourselves for the time that we're going to spend together today. Let's place our feet on the floor so that we're grounded and connected to Mother Earth. Feel the chair or the couch that's supporting you behind your back and underneath you. Close your eyes if you like, and take some slow, deep breaths. How are you feeling in your body right now? As you take some slow, deep breaths, try to release the tension from the day and center yourself in this moment. You can imagine any tension you feel in your body leaving as you exhale. And so part of this practice is focused on filling your heart with unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. So as you breathe in, one of the phrases that we use is, I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. First, for yourself, because to do this work, you need to have unconditional love for yourself before you can give it to other people. And as you breathe, you can imagine that your heart is filling up with unconditional love and unconditional acceptance, wherever that love is coming from. Your ancestors, your faith. I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. I am filling with unconditional love. I am filling with unconditional acceptance. I am filling with unconditional love. I am filling with unconditional acceptance. I am filling with unconditional love. I am filling with unconditional acceptance. When you're ready, wiggle your feet, your toes, your hands. Come back to your body. You can, if you like, you can rub your hands together. Feel the heat there and apply that to any part of your body that you need. And last of all, give yourself a big hug. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate that. So that was what we call holding space for transformation. So again, if you're just tuning in, my name is Jennifer Folayan. My program, Spread Your Wings, The Courage to Fly, will be featured in South Africa this November at the Artizen Conference. And it's a conference for artists who are committed to social transformation. And so I'm happy to have some special guests here tonight. And it came about through a series of connections. And I like what Mandela says, I never lose, I either win or I learn. And so I had the pleasure of traveling to Washington State in August. And through a series of connections, I was able to meet my special guest today. So first, I'd like to share with you how we got there. And so right before, it may have been August, in the summertime, there was a special tour called the Red Road to DC tour. And master carvers from the Lummi Nation traveled all across the United States with this grand 5,000-pound totem pole. And part of the last stop was Washington, D.C. So this is where I met the Lummi Nation and got to chat and welcome. And they were like, hey, you should come visit us. And so we had Uncle Doug. He was like inviting everybody to come to Washington. We're like, okay, sure, whatever. And then, they were exhausted. They had been traveling for like, I don't know how many months to bring this totem pole to DC to share important messages about our water, about Indigenous issues. You should look it up to find out more information. Deb Haaland received it for the Biden administration. So I was like, sure, I'll take you up on your offer. I flew out to Washington State for a conference and then called Freddie up, like found him on Facebook. I was like, you remember how you said we should come visit you? Well, I'm here on your front porch, and these are the real reservation dogs. They were the ones that welcomed me that day. And I also had the pleasure on my trip of meeting our special guest tonight. Sky, we met in a retreat with Tony Tenfingers, who's a Lakota elder. And then I met the Lane sisters here as they were connecting to their culture. And here's Uncle Doug again, like, oh, wow, you're really in my house now. So I'd like to welcome our guest tonight. And 1 second. Okay. Hi. So we'll just go around, introduce ourselves. We're just having a casual conversation. We may touch upon topics that may be sensitive, as we had opened up with honoring Orange Shirt Day. These are very heavy topics at times that we deal with in our communities. So if at any point, if we're discussing something, either us on the panel or in the audience, if you feel triggered or feel uneasy, just know that you're not alone. This is a safe space, and take time for yourself. Maybe practice some of that holding space of just breathing through any anxiety, and know that we're here. We have the chats open for questions. So, Sky, would you mind introducing yourself and where you're from and a little bit about yourself?
Shaloo. My name is Sky Pagaling. I come from the Kalispell Indian Reservation, which is located in Usk, Washington, Washington State, not Washington, D.C. That's often confused. But I grew up in Washington. I didn't actually move to the reservation until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And it's kind of funny because I really didn't know that I was Native American until I was about that age. And I grew up with my brothers. I have 9 brothers, and we ran around up on our property and stuff, and we had no idea that we were Indian boys running around. So that was interesting to find out. But as I moved to the Kalispell Indian Reservation, I started to learn more about my culture and my heritage, and not only the heritage and culture from the past, but also the current heritage and culture of our people. And there are a lot of people who think that that Native American traditions, that all of them stem from the very beginning. And there are a lot of sacred traditions that stem from a deep past, but there are also modern traditions that we've developed living in this day and age that you also have to learn about. So really being able to understand all of those things was something that I had to overcome. For a long time, I was trying to emulate this image that I had created for myself as a Native American man, in the U.S. And one day I went to go see a spiritual leader of mine, and I was telling him about my dreams, and I was talking about eagle feathers and all of these things that I had imagined that made me Native American. And he stopped me. He goes, just stop, slow down. Stop trying so hard to be Native American or indigenous. You are Native American, so just be yourself, and that's good enough. I think that there's a lot of things that stem from us trying so hard to be what we think is indigenous, or what we think is who we're supposed to be. And I think that if we're really able to accept who we are as individuals, we'll be able to contribute to our larger groups in a better way. My grandparents were Abraham High Nick, who was a medicine man for the Kalispel tribe, and Nancy Ignis Nick. And my parents were Marilyn Nick and Bobby Pagaling. My father grew up in Los Angeles, and he had always had like a connection to Native people, but that also got lost, as he, lived in Los Angeles and started to get into the gang culture there, and he wasn't really sure, and he kind of lost it in a certain point of his age, and then he ended up in prison up in Oregon, and he did like 10 years in prison. And while he was in there, he became the leader of the Native American club there, and he started running it kind of the same way that he had operated his gangs and things. And then a group of Native American leaders came to him. And they said, what are you doing, with your leadership? Why don't you use your influence and your power to not just advance financially, but instead lead the people the way they need to be leaded. And so he started a movement where he had all of his Native American brothers and sisters. He had them. He brought a medicine man in, and he had the medicine man bless all of their hair, and so it became a sacred object, a religious object. And in prisons, they have to respect religious objects, and the prisons were not allowed anymore to mandate the cutting of hair. So that was one thing that he did, and he got out of prison and he got married, and he started working with the American Indian movement, AIM, and he started working with them for a couple of decades, and yeah, all of this came to fruition, and it kind of put me where I am today. I have my bachelor's degree in humanities from Whitworth University, and my kids are enrolled in a full immersion language school that teaches our Native American language, our dialect of Salish, which is a dialect that spreads from Washington over into Montana, all the way up into Canada, and there's also it spreads all throughout that area. And I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited to have these conversations. I'm excited that there's a space and there's a place where we can have these conversations, because it can be difficult being an Indigenous person and trying to speak out in public about some of the issues that we deal with. And I'm glad that this space was created. Thank you, Jennifer, or Turtle Woman, for this opportunity. And I look forward to the conversations we're going to have.
Thank you, Sky. I know I can relate to what you're saying. Is a lot of us in our generation are struggling with identity. Like, we know that we're Native, we know we're Indigenous, but longing for that certain connection. And it's also a pressure from the outside to prove, well, are you Indian? Are you Indian enough? Do you belong here? And so this paradox of within our country being invisible, but even within ourselves, our own communities feeling invisible or undeserving, or whatever the case may be. I know when we were talking at the retreat, we were kind of laughing that, hey, we're still here. Like, when we see each other and connect, and it doesn't matter if we're from different tribes, there is a certain specialness about seeing ourselves reflected in each other. And that's how I felt when I met Sunny and her sister. We were I just kind of randomly popped up at a house, and they're all sitting around the dinner table, and they shared with me that they also were trying to connect with their culture. Sunny, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few things, where you're from and all that good stuff?
Hello, everybody, and thank you
And let's see.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear your mic.
Oh, can you hear me
So
now?
let's make sure that you're connected there.
Can you hear me?
Is your no?
You're just really quiet. I can hear you a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I'm not really sure where the mic is on my thing. Can you hear me now?
Is maybe like something plugged into your phone? While she figures out her audio, do you want to go?
Laptop now. Let me see. Maybe if I put in headphones.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe the audio isn't connected somehow, or maybe it was like hooked up through Bluetooth or something. Or okay. And is it Sharaya?
Sharia.
Sharaya, I apologize. Sharaya, would you like to introduce yourself while Sunny's getting her audio together?
Sure. Nazi, I'm in Chalicha, Sharia Lane, son of Snap. My name's Sharia Lane. I'm from the Lummi Nation in Northwest Washington. And yeah, Sunny's my sister. And let's see, a whole intro. I mean, okay. Well, a little bit of my story is that, well, I say now too that I'm a member of the Lummi Nation on my mom's side and an American descendant of slavery on my father's side, which is a whole other thing. And I was born in Seattle and moved up to Lummi when I was like 5 or 6. And was raised there pretty much all my life. So this whole conversation about identity and then for me, like looking a certain way is interesting because you're like rezzed out, you know,
Yes.
you can be who you are, you know, and going out into the world like that and having, you know, many years of like figuring that out. I know when I went back to Seattle, like moved there and I was like allowing people to tell me who I was, you know, based on how I looked and just a whole bunch of exploration. And ultimately my journey at the moment has led me back home. So I moved down to Seattle for about 12 years and went to school down there and just moved back home to Bellingham last year. And so, yeah, it's been quite the journey, I must say. I mean, I know me and my sister's stories are going to be so similar because we're sisters. And, but, you know, our early life was, you know, our lives were changed by the Indian Child Welfare Act. I was just on a call with somebody yesterday having a conversation about that because I had a friend of mine that came to visit. I have a custody share with my son, a parenting plan, and you know it's 50-50 right now. And I was having some feelings about that the other day. I was angry and sad and stuff. And a friend of mine came over who I've known all my life, and they have 3 children, and 2 of them were adopted out years ago. And it totally just changed my whole attitude. You know, it's very humbling. But this friend of mine has been sober for 7 going on 8 years and has a younger child that they have at home and take care of. And when they lost their kids, you know, they were in a pretty bad situation and have just been doing so good for so long. And I just asked him, I said, geez, if your kids get adopted out, can you ever get them back? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense at this point, you know, that they're with a non-native family and, you know, they're like, yeah, the foster parents let us see them less and less, you know, now it's pretty rare and it's just up to them, you know, how much they let us see them. And then I got on a call the next day with the dean of a school at the UW who's going to be organizing an event around the child welfare system. She actually shared with me that there's an effort in Minnesota where she was from where the Black community is trying to create legislation similar to ICWA because the issues of removal and adoption and foster care are similar in the Black community. You know, I brought that conversation up with her. I said, you know, that's crazy, you know, because we're talking about boarding schools right now and, you know, removal. And to be talking to my friend about their kids being right up the way, you know, and being in a system where they cannot get them back. And I asked my friend, I said, how do you get through that? Like, I can't even imagine what you must be feeling and going through. And they just said, you know, all I can do is carry myself in a way and live in a way that when they do come back and they do ask about me, that people will have good things to say. And I carry myself with such integrity that when my kids grow up and hear stories about me and learn more about who they are and where they're from, that they know that I was, you know, living in a good way and that I'm a good person. And, you know, I bring that up, one, because it was just a couple days ago. It's just been on my heart since having that conversation. But, you know, also remembering my own experience too of, you know, my mom told us that she had a Native social worker who told her if she didn't get her kids with family, she was never going to see them again. Which, you know, later on going to school for public policy and learning all the terms and all the history and all the stuff, I said, oh, that's ICWA, you know, that changed the course of our lives. Because it's true for Native kids to get adopted out, mostly to non-Native families, and to not have any connection to their home, the land that they're from, their family, their culture, their community. I mean, that's something that for us, as hard as it was growing up on the res and experiencing, you know, all the things that come with it, you know, as an adult, it's like the greatest blessing, because it's like that anchor. You know, when I was in the city and having a really hard time and start just really going through some things in life, I said, I'm going home. I got to go home. You know, I got to go be with my family. And, you know, got a place here, and my grandpa has been helping me every step of the way, you know, not just with getting my home in order and helping me take care of my home, but also just spending that time, you know, and those teachings in his own way, and that healing that just comes from being with our elders and so many things, you know. So when I think about the boarding schools and the Orange Shirt Day that we're celebrating today, you know, I also think about the many friends and relatives that I have whose children were taken from them in this generation right now. And regardless of what they're doing or how they're living, that their children were taken from them and they're not going to get them back, you know, while they're still children. And so that's just something that I want to be able to talk more about too, and want to raise awareness on, because I'm telling you, that conversation with my friend, I just didn't even have words, you know, to have my own son and to just understand what that feels like, to have these systems that can do that right now today. So that's a long intro, but thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, so many different layers. I know here on the East Coast, we have a lot of Black Indigenous populations, and some tribes are welcoming, some aren't. You could be cousins with someone who has a tribal card, and because you have the one drop rule, some tribes will reject you. And then just like navigating that, like, how am I seen out in the world? Like, what are you? Like that ambiguity, like everybody always asking, well, what exactly are you? Like, well, dang, like I'm just me. So thank you for sharing that, and like those difficulties of navigating that. And I also was thinking about today. When Sunny and I were just talking at the table, and she happened to mention that she was in foster care, and I was like, oh, well, how ironic, I was in foster care. Like, you know, we have a lot of similarities. And so it's like, as you're trying to unpack all this stuff, is like, is it because I'm Native? Is it because I was a foster care kid? Is it because of generational trauma? And it just kind of layers back. Like, my father was also in prison. My mother was homeless at the time when I was put in foster care. And then it became the notion of like, they didn't really help my mom to get me back. And then it was like the notion of, well, Jennifer's better off in the foster home. And I had 2 different foster homes. They were like white, military, Christian. I had to learn how to say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And, the first foster home pretty much treated me like a dishwasher. But the second foster home, they were loving. We got presents at Christmas. I learned how to go to church, act properly. But it was a certain conditional kind of love. Like, as long as I got good grades, followed all the rules, I was good to go. But if I try to express my culture, it was kind of like, oh, Jennifer, you're looking like a hippie today. Like, do you really want to wear your hair in braids? Do you really want to wear that headband? I was all like trying to in any way feel indigenous, like Sky was talking about, like made little leather necklaces with beads, like something just to say, like, yes, I'm Indian and like connecting to my culture. So thank you for sharing that. And Sunny, do we have sound yet?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, woohoo! Now you gotta sing a song. Jessica sings the song.
Oh, Jennifer.
Got the drum in the background.
I wish I knew some songs.
Yes.
I want to start by saying thank you so much, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I feel just so honored and privileged that you would ask me to even be a part of this because, like Jennifer mentioned, we had met in her travel to Washington State, and I live in Seattle. I'm from Lummi, and we had went back to pretty much visit the uncles. Uncle Doug is who she was talking about, my grandma's brother. And when I met Jennifer, she said how she met Uncle Doug and how she got there. And she has definitely changed my life and inspired me to say yes when I want to say no. And I want to stay in my comfort zone because for her to just show up, somebody gave her an invitation and she said yes. It definitely inspired me. And I didn't really think too much of it. Like, I meet a lot of different people around Uncle Doug's, and after we had exchanged stories, I was like, this is freaking amazing. This lady came all the way from the East Coast to take somebody up on an invitation. And so since meeting Jennifer, I have been saying yes to a lot of things I would normally say no to. So that's that part. There was just so much good stuff said. Sky, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. Shreya, Jennifer, thank you for putting this together. As Shreya mentioned, we are sisters. I'm the older sister. We, because of the Indian Child Welfare Act, grew up in foster homes. We got taken away. I was 5. My sister was 2. We did foster homes in Seattle for a while. And we had this great foster home lady. She was black and white. And we ended up going back to Lummi just for visits because the Indian Child Welfare Act stated Native kids had to be in Native homes. And, as a kid, you just kind of go with the flow. You don't really think too much of anything. But as I got older, I would think about this lady every now and again. And she actually found me when like maybe 7 or 8 years ago and came all the way from Portland to meet me as an adult. And I got to hear her side of that whole situation. And at the time, she thought she couldn't have kids and she spoiled us rotten. She was great to us. And we would go back home to Lummi for visits starting on the weekends, and weekends turned into weeks that turned into months. And then we just kind of moved in with family. And we got bounced around to a lot of different homes. And it was just a life-changing experience to hear her side of how everything happened. Because as a kid, like I said, I just really learned how to go with the flow. From 5 to 17, I was in 17 different foster homes. And as I would go through life, I would just kind of like, oh, that happened. That's back there. We're going to leave that back there. But now I have 2 kids of my own, 2 girls, 14 and 4. And it's really like Creator, the universe, putting things in my face for me to really deal with my own childhood issues. Because for a long time I was angry. I was resentful at my mom. I could not understand, why did you have kids if you couldn't take care of them? And I was able to go through my own life experience of having kids and having my own addiction. And so I got to see from her perspective, like, it's not that simple. You don't just your life doesn't just come together because you push kids out. Like, you have now other people to think about, but you also have all this stuff that if you don't deal with, spills over into them. And my daughters being 4 and 14, those were the ages that my life pretty much changed forever. And I'm just so grateful that I have the tools and the opportunities to be able to work through that painful trauma and all of these things of the identity crisis. Of course, I had that. I'm learning to kind of work through that. And now I'm having these conversations with my 14-year-old daughter because my sister and I are enrolled Lummi tribal members, and there's a blood quantum requirement. You have to be at least a quarter, and we're both 3/8. My daughter's dad is from Louisiana, and his skin is black, but he's black and native also. And his grandma is just as bright as me. But down there, they don't really have the tribal recognition like they do up here. So he doesn't have papers and all this other stuff. So long story short, my kids are not enrolled. And my older daughter asked me one day, and it just like made my heart so heavy. She said, if I'm not able to be enrolled, does that mean that I'm not Lummi? And like, it really just made me want to cry because that's all she knows. That's all she knows. We live in Washington. So she knows our family. She knows our culture. She knows the way that, we do things. And it still like kind of chokes me up when I think about it, that a little tiny card determines whether or not we get to claim if we're a part of this tribe or not. And it's just I don't know. There's really no words that I can say because I really try to like have these conversations with her and not let her get hung up on the blood quantum and things like that, because I was hung up on that for a long time for my own self. I have a lot of relatives that are for force and, going to the smokehouse and to different ceremonies. I would hear a lot of elders have these conversations about how wrong it is to mate outside of the tribe. And I'm here now. So in 6th grade, we had a culture teacher come in and had like a 2-hour conversation about how wrong it is to go outside the race. Mind you, I'm the only mixed kid in the class. So I had a lot of confusion and anger and resentment and like all these things because I'm constantly hearing from my own tribal elders how pretty much I'm wrong. Like, I'm wrong for being here because I'm not all the way native. And I just really feel like at the space I am in life now, it's definitely taken a lot of work, but it is such a blessing. Like, I'm really starting to see all of the things that like kind of were my baggage at one point are really my blessings. Because going back to my mom losing custody of us, she wasn't in a mental space to take care of kids. She wasn't ever shown how to love, how to take care of herself, how to do these things that you need to teach kids to do so they can be the best adults they can be. And I didn't know that until I started pretty much really like kind of going to AA and going to counseling and like working through my own stuff. And I got to see like, wow, I was carrying a lot of baggage that wasn't just mine. It was my mom's, it was my grandma's, it was my great grandma's, because in my lineage, like, I'm not the only person that went to foster care. My mom went, my grandma went, my great grandma went, like all the way back to contact when boarding schools were forced on everybody. And so there's a lot of things that were lost, and a lot of elders that still don't really talk about those things. They don't really talk about those times in their life. And I used to always ask because I was so confused, like, how is our family so biologically close but so physically and emotionally disconnected, and nobody can give me an answer. And it wasn't until I started to get older that I seen like, oh, there's all this stuff, because I'm getting snatched as a kid and getting everything stripped from you and getting pretty much the world that you're living in forced in your face. Like, you're wrong is not only not okay, but it really messes you up as a person. And so I have just so many feelings around just everything. I still have, bits of resentment about all of that and how all of that happened, because it wasn't fair, nor was it right. And for whatever reason, it happened. And I feel like these particular spaces that you've created and other people are creating to be able to talk about this is so, so important, because our elders and relatives didn't have this space. And my sister and I just had a conversation the other day, because I went to go meet with my sponsor and do my fourth step. And a fourth step is pretty much me writing down on paper all of my resentments and how do I play into all of that. And I didn't want to do it anymore, because I spent one whole day crying, and I'm like, this is for the birds. Like, I don't want to cry all day. And my sponsor was like, tears are healing. But with me growing up, I always heard tears are for suckers. And a lot of these people that were telling me this, like, their lives were so much harder than mine. They had went through boarding school, they had went through the military, they had been orphans and had to raise themselves. So it was something that, they had to tell themselves to get through life. And one thing my sister said that really resonated with me was, it would be disrespecting our relatives and elders and ancestors to not take advantage of the opportunities to be able to process our traumas and talk about it. And just like Jennifer and I had connected through our story, like, I had no idea that she was going to have a similar story. I just kind of started telling her, like, how I showed up to Uncle Doug's and where I live and how it all tied in and stuff like that. So I just want to say thank you again, Jennifer, for putting this all together and allowing me to be a part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What's coming up for you, Sky? I know, you also have children, and thinking about this legacy, like experiencing your father in prison, and now you're a dad. So I don't know, what's coming up for you?
Well, I think, for me, as far as like, becoming a father and understanding my relationship with my father and this idea of, foster care and things, because I went through similar experiences, and my dad was always able to maintain custody of me. And but at the same time, I saw like my brothers and sisters, like they would sometimes end up like in a foster home. And um, we were fortunate enough to have someone in like who kind of did the foster care thing, and we were connected to this person. Her name is Bonnie Womack, and she's a very kind person, and she was a loving person, and she's a second mother to me. And we were fortunate to have that. But I learned as I got older, and I spoke to my mother. Actually passed when I was young. I was about I think I was around 8 or so when she passed, and she passed from cirrhosis of the liver due to alcoholism. And when she passed, I kind of found myself always looking for a mother. And my aunt Joanne actually stepped in and took care of me and fulfilled that role. And that was really useful to me. But just understanding those relationships with our parents, and understanding that despite regardless of what my father did, he had bouts with drugs and alcohol and domestic violence. And despite what my parents have done, no matter where I ended up, I still wanted to be with them. I still wanted to be in their presence, and when you end up in foster homes and you end up in someone else's care, they tell you that you're in a better place now. You're in a safer place now. You're in, some better condition than you were before. But when you're in those situations, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you were taken and you were put into a place that doesn't fit you. It's not the same lifestyle that you grew up in. It doesn't have the same feel. Things have changed, and learning to adapt to those situations is really, I think, is really important. And it can cause a lot of disparity with who we are as people, because as we end up in these different situations and we find out that we don't mesh well with this new family or what have you, then um, those situations are what those cause identity crises, and those situations can really help determine who you're going to be, because you have to decide, am I going to abide by these new rules? Am I going to rebel and utilize, am I less Native American because I eat at a table and I eat with a knife and a fork or whatever? um, you know uh, identifying those things and those those key factors that play into who we are, and adapting to those situations, and understanding that regardless of how we behave, we're still indigenous. Regardless of how I cut my hair, or the type of clothes I wear, or what have you, I'm still indigenous. And when it comes to our youth and things, I feel like our youth really struggle with that, because they live in two different worlds. They live in a world where they're on reservation, they're with their people, and then they step outside of that world and they start to go to work in mainstream capitalism in America, and it tells them things punctuality comes before your relationships. That means that you have to be to work 9 to 5. Don't be late, regardless if so and so has broken down and you're supposed to go help them, but you have to go to work. That work life balance is something that I struggled with when I first moved to moved off the reservation and into the city of Spokane. And coming to terms, it actually took because I was sitting there after I moved from the reservation. I was like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I show up to work on time? Why can't I get used to this schedule? Why do I not know anything about how to operate in a professional space? And I couldn't understand why. And I didn't actually realize until I had taken a multicultural class at Spokane Falls Community College. And it taught me about collectivism and individualistic values, and how not only are Native American people collectivists, and they focus more on relationships and the way that the way we relate to the earth, the way we relate to one another in those relationships. That's what we focused on. But moving into American society, capitalist society, the individualistic values are the values that they hold dear, and so competition, uniqueness, punctuality, all of those things are what was valued there. So understanding that part of myself, that those two things are within me, and learning how to balance those things, and find places where I can be with my family, and then times where I have to perform professionally in order to provide for my family. Finding a balance for that was something that kind of transformed me as an adult, um, because I think it really helped me to develop who I was going to be, and how I was going to help my people in the future. So I now work. I'm now helping to develop a program. It's called the Tribal Career Readiness Program, and what it does is it helps Native American people transition from transition into work. So they're not sitting there thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm like, nothing's wrong with you. Let's just work on a couple of these skills and give you the things that you need in order to be successful in this position or in this place, and really help them to hold their value with themselves, because as Native American people coming from poverty, coming from trauma, there's not always a person that sits down with you and tells you that you're worth something, that you're worth putting my time into, that you are significant as a human being, and you deserve all of the happiness in the world. Because I believe as individuals, as human beings, we deserve that it's a human right to be happy. We should have the ability to live our lives in a way that brings us joy. and so that's something that I really want to bring. I want to instill in my children that it's okay to be who you are and be happy in your own skin. It's a divine human right that we're allowed to be and accept who we are and bring that to the world.
Amen. Thank you, Sky. So we do have another special guest that just popped up. So we're going to hear from our next special guest.
Got it. Being a warrior, it's not always easy. You and your thuggy ass friends, what are you doing for your people? It's easy to be bad. It's hard to be a warrior with dignity. Remember that. In my time, we gave everything. We died for our people. We died for our land. What are you going to do? What are you going to fight for? Nah, I'm just fucking with you. But for real, though, listen to what I said. Marinate on it. I hope.
So, I guess in closing, what are we going to do about it? I know Sky was talking about some things he's doing in his community. I know Sunny has some things up her sleeve, and you've been studying different things too. In my quest, I've always felt connected to the arts, and that's why I'm excited about this trip to South Africa, of using the arts, but also like our culture, like our different teachings. And as we each become more connected to whatever that means, like sometimes when I go to Washington, I'm lummy, like I want to be in the canoe, I want to be like connecting. Or if I go visit Sky, we participated in this nation building exercise. So we both happen to be part of the Squirrel Nation. And, we had like these 3 nations that we developed. There was Squirrel, Moose, and Turkey Nation. So we always have the ability to create new possibilities. And as Sunny was saying, sometimes like it's filled with bitterness and anger and tears. Like even today, in my therapy session, I was feeling like I've been feeling more grounded, and that the past is, slowly becoming more over there. But there are times that I could get triggered, whether it's an argument with someone or maybe feeling inadequate or abandoned. And as I like fill my heart space, and then it's like all of a sudden I'm back to 8 years old, I'm back to 14 years old, and just like really pissed off that those people that were supposed to protect us also were the people that hurt us. And it's a tough situation to be in. So my father, you're supposed to go to your dad and say, hey, this person's messing with me or whatever. But if your father's also the perpetrator and also doing all these other things, it's like this idea of invisible and visible. So we're invisible, like our needs are invisible, but we are totally exposed and vulnerable. And then even as Indigenous people in our nation getting recognized, like this invisibility, like, oh, Indians are still here, like you still exist. And then we're having to prove our existence, but yet it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? So there's so many things that we deal with as Indigenous people. And I just really appreciate, we just barely touched on our stories. I know there's so much more richness, so much more things that we're processing. And I really appreciate the vulnerability of all of you here that to just share the story. Like, it's not perfect. We don't want to be stereotypes. We don't want to like, oh, poor little Indian kids, their parents were alcoholics. We always knew it, like, no, but this is like a whole, generations of hurt, generations of abuse, colonization. I was just recently interviewed on a news show, and they were talking about the white body syndrome. It's like, well, if you look at the doctrine of discovery, where it says that Indian people are not human and you have the right to rape and pillage not only the people, but the earth, no wonder, these cycles have continued, because how we treat the earth and how we treat our people, now we have a situation that we can totally transform it. So our great spirit who asked us, what are we going to do? We can close with some things and possibilities that we're dreaming of, and what is it that we think that we can do and needs to be done. Shariah, sorry. I'm going to get it right.
It's okay. It's Shreya.
Shariah. Okay.
It was a song back in the day, I guess.
Oh, cool. Hey. No. Oh yeah, back to the question. Our ancestors are asking us what we gonna do.
That's how I knew you were native, Jennifer, when maybe you were just laughing. Stop in the kitchen.
I know.
We got in there laughing.
Like we all just want to sit around, hug each other, and laugh. Eat cookies. Like, where's the snacks at? Let's get to the real stuff.
No, yeah. I had I have a friend who we've had some debates over the years that always stick with me. Like, I never understand in the moment how significant. So, like, these are debates too. We're like arguing about a point, And I was talking to one of my friends a while back about energy. The amount of energy that we have as human beings, and the amount of energy that we can designate or allocate, as people of color, as Indigenous people, towards changing systems and structures, dismantling systems and structures. One of the things about this call that's coming up I thought was so interesting is this lady said she's getting a speaker to come from Texas who is from the School of Social Work down there, who's talking about abolishing the foster care system or something, the child welfare system, just like completely getting rid of it and starting over, and talking about different ideas like that. It's so important, to be thinking about things like that and working towards those types of changes. But then there's also the other side, which is investing in and pouring into your community and your people. And they're two very, very different areas of work. And so I know for some years now, I've been in school and been in different organizations and different spaces, really pushing that change piece and trying to work towards change and justice on a systemic level. But I think for me in the future, my focus is really going to be on that healing and that pouring into my community and my family, and really just focusing in on that. So one of the areas specifically, we had an event out here maybe a couple months ago. It was an overdose awareness event down at the Stomish grounds, and it was only put together in a couple days. It only took a couple days to put it together, and there's well over 100 people there. And it was, what they did was they had two speakers come up to light candles. And they said, if you've lost a loved one to an overdose, or if you have a loved one that's out there right now, you don't know if they're going to make it from one day to the next, then come up and we'll say their name and light a candle for them. And, it was a very personal thing. It was a community thing. I've been to public events in the city, for example, where, there's lots of people coming together, for different causes. But this was like really different because it was so personal. I knew pretty much every name that was spoken that night. I knew the people who were going up to share the names, personally, talking about their parent or their child or their sibling or, their grandchildren. And so that was a really inspiring moment for me personally, to really just do what I can to support that healing and wellness of our people in our community, especially around those of us who have loved ones that are in addiction and alcoholism. We just lost a couple of more family members this year. And, those types of things, it's not normal. It's not natural. And so I know as Native people, we go through so much that our only option is to be strong and to get through it. But it doesn't mean that it's natural to lose your mom, in that way, to lose your child in that way, to be, finding your way, like fighting your way through because you're, orphaned because your parents are on drugs. We do it, but it's not natural. And so that's the work that I'm really focusing on, is just having opportunities for us to come together and to just call that for what it is, and like, you don't have to just be strong and just hold it all in and isolate, go through a situation like that in isolation. But to really, that's what that event really inspired me to do, was that coming together of how powerful it can be when people understand that they're not the only ones going through these situations. And if we can, encourage and uplift one another. And what that looks like, I'm not sure. I know Siamowit, our aunt that you met out here, me and her have had some really good conversations about different ideas for programs and things. She was telling me about a program they had years ago, like 20 years ago or so, which was NANACOA, she said, Native American Adult Children of Alcoholics. And it was one of our elders that we just lost out here recently that was leading that work back then. And his loss was a really, really big loss to the community. And so I think about those types of things, especially being at this age and stage in life. It's almost like I did a lot for myself. I did a lot of running around. I did a lot of traveling. I've done a lot of really cool things. And when is it time to pick up the torch and take on that responsibility that our elders have carried for so long, of passing on the teachings, and just being in that space that, requires one of our, out here in Lummi, we say our, I don't know, slogan, I guess, all over the website and everything, like, to protect our shilling and protect our way of life, and the only reason that we have it to this day is because the people that came before us took on that responsibility to protect, preserve, and to pass that forward. And so I've talked to a lot of my cousins and friends, we're around the same age group. Like, I think it's our time to really start learning what we need to learn to be able to fill those shoes. And so those are just a couple things that I'm planning on in the future.
Awesome. I'm just planning on saving the world. No biggie. Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I was thinking about that too, this notion that, oh, we're so resilient. And especially like Black and brown people, we're just expected, just tough it out. We're tough. We can handle these things, lashes on our back and slavery and getting stolen from our families. And like you said, it's not natural. Like, that stuff shouldn't happen. And it comes back again to that idea, like, are we human? Are we divine creatures? And is there a lawfulness to how we're treated? Or are we just beast and, oh, well, they'll tough it out. So thank you. These are, getting back to, we are human and this shouldn't be the norm. So thank you. Sunny, what you got to say?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. What a great conversation. And I have to say it again. It's just such an honor and a privilege, Jennifer, that you even thought of me to ask me to be a part of this. And I don't know, maybe it's just my own theory, but I always kind of said this to myself, is the most oppressed people are actually the strongest people if we actually start to believe that and come together. So yeah, this is huge. Like, I have goosebumps and my arm hairs are like standing up right now, because I know this is like a seed that's being planted that is definitely going to multiply into so many great things. And there's so many ideas that I have. And I guess what my part is, what I see. So the older I get, the more in tune I become with myself and just kind of start working through all of my stuff. I have these visions, and it's not very long visions, but it's like pretty much myself at the end of my life. and I can see clips of things. And that's why I laughed so hard when you showed the reservation dogs, because that's actually my new favorite show. I can relate to all that stuff on there. But when the vision comes and he says what he says, like, what are you going to do for your people? I feel like that's kind of where my head is at. And I'm not in a position to do anything right now. I live in the city, but I do feel like all the things that I'm learning in my lifetime, I'm definitely going to bring it back home. And one thing I have started here in the city is a nonprofit feeding the homeless. And I kind of touched on that. Like, I struggled with drug addiction for a long time. And I was homeless and went through all these things. So in a way, it helps keep me sober. And when I was back home for the overdose awareness dinner, I talked to the guy that created it and talked to a few other people that are like in high positions on the reservation. And of course, most reservations, everybody's related, everybody knows each other. So we still all know each other, even if we don't stay in contact. And I was sharing with them what I do and how I want to bring that back home. And I think that it's going to hit in a different way back home, because there is this unspoken divide. Like, oh, I'm sober now, you still get high, like we can't talk. BS. We're still family regardless of your decisions. And I feel like there's going to be it's definitely going to be a challenge, because it's not easy seeing your loved ones strung out and drunk and making bad decisions. But I know, like, Uncle Doug and Uncle Jewel, they're some of my greatest mentors, and they never lost faith in me. And there was times that I was strung out and I was at my lowest, and I just, I wasn't trying to be seen. And they would come and give me a hug, and like my spirit just like was so happy and so full that they didn't just ignore me and walk past me like most everybody else. They stopped and they acknowledged me. They gave me a hug. And so I say all of that to say, when I do bring it home and we do show up to these different, what they call trap houses or drug houses, and just deliver food. I don't want to know what's going on. I don't need to know what's going on. But what I do know is you're my relative and you need to eat. Like, I know that's going to awaken things in people. And I think it was probably like 10 years ago or more, when I did live in Bellingham last time, I had created a youth group. And this youth group was, my whole vision was to have these kids that really aren't doing anything else, on the res. It's like an age group to where you start to get curious. You want to get out of the house. And most of the time, what you see in the house and out of the house is not things that you want your kids to be partaking in. So I was fortunate enough to have all these kids volunteer to be in my group. I had like 25 kids, and the whole premise was to bring them to meet with the elders so they can create their own connections. And we called it Bridging the Gap. And it was like me and my daughter created this group, and we met every Friday, because I know there's such a disconnect from these generations, like the elders that didn't grow up with technology and didn't grow up with the platforms that we have and safe spaces and all this stuff. And then the younger generation that has all this world just moving fast and like doesn't really give you a chance or a space to not just be yourself, but to connect with the earth and connect with the spirits of things, and just understand that we come from a lineage of strong people. So we met every Friday. One Friday would be the kids. We just take them to the Y or kickball or whatever. And then the other Friday we'd go to Little Bear Creek. That's what they call the old folks home in Lummi. We'd go to Little Bear Creek and just let the kids do whatever, play cards, listen to stories, and, just let these two generations that wouldn't otherwise match up just like come and spend time, share a meal. And that's something that's always like sat in my DNA, is like getting people together and feeding people has always been my thing, because that was something I was kind of like pulled into, and like where I found my clarity, I guess, when I see like everybody coming together and eating and laughing and just like sharing that energy. It makes my heart feel so happy. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of times I want to go back home so bad, and I want to participate in all this stuff. But I know for myself, being so new in recovery, that universal law applies to me. And I love to think that it doesn't, that I'm different. And, I can do things different, but I do know that I'm a part of this universe, and universal law applies to me. And so for me, I just really need to focus on not just staying clean and sober, but working through those traumatic experiences that even kept me in the streets for so long, and understanding that all of my once were burdens are actually my biggest blessings. They're actually my biggest blessings. And so it just really makes my heart so happy to see, like, we're all from different spaces. And Sky, it's really great to meet you. And when you were explaining what you're doing for Native people, I love that, because I'm 36 years old and I've never had a job for more than a year because I move around. Like, if I don't like what you're doing or whatever, I'm out. There's other jobs. But that was something that I heard all the time in tribal school. I was like, when are we done? When is this over? Like, leave your watch at the door. We're done when we're done. In growing up on the res, that's just something that's ingrained into us, is like ceremonies and different things. They take as long as they take. And so transitioning into the white world, yeah, you have to be on time. You have to do all these things that were not taught on the res. And I feel like one of my biggest things is really looking to my ancestors for the answers. And even though I'm not able to go back home as much as I want to, I am able to watch YouTube and my uncles and I've been watching different chiefs from different tribes and just listening to their message and listening to their story. And they all pretty much have the same story, is if we look to our ancestors for the answers, we'll be fine. Like, we just have to respect one another and respect everything and share. It's plain and simple. Those two simple things, respect and share. And I feel like in the society that we're brought up in is all about me and mine and what can I do for my family and my house, when our relatives, no matter what tribe we're from, did not operate like that. They operated as, we take care of the people take care of us. We're all one. We're all in this together. So again, thank you so much, Miss Jennifer, for even considering me for this conversation. And Sky, it's great to meet you. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
So what's our new podcast we're doing gonna be called? We should just mix our names together.
I know.
We'll
Whatever it is, Sonny's cooking, so I was like, okay, you love to feed people, well, I love to eat, so yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody. So much richness shared here tonight, and again, just take care of ourselves. It's one day at a time, one step at a time, 1 minute at a time. We're not going to solve all the problems, but I know that we do have this gift within each of us, and there's a reason that we're all together and that we met. And for people watching, there's a reason that you're here. And so don't give up. If you feel isolated, you feel confused, you feel overwhelmed, you're tired of dealing with all this stuff, it's okay to feel that way, and just take the time for yourself. Take a deep breath, give yourself a big hug, get a snack. But just know that we're out here. We all stumbled through life. We all had ups and downs and fell on our faces, but we are still here. And I love each and every one of you. So thank you for tuning in tonight. And I don't know, we should have a song or something, but I didn't come prepared, but next time. So take care, everybody.
Play that. We can play that Redbone.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that changed my life. I didn't know.
Oh, yes,
Reservation Dogs.
I know.
I was like talking to my grandpa. I said, Grandpa. He said, oh, yeah, they only have that one song. I said, still. You knew and you didn't tell me.
Sky has a res dog he wants to introduce.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us your doggy's name.
This is Kikawapa. Look at the camera. Yeah, he's a Pomeranian. Kikawapa means dog in Salish, but we thought Kikawapa was cuter than the word dog, so.
Definitely cuter.
And this is Selena. Selena, come in. Oh, where'd she go?
Oh.
Yeah, that's my pretty girl. But no, Jennifer, I really enjoyed this opportunity, and I can't believe the time went by as fast as it did. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but I feel like we have this group in particular has a lot to share, and I think it's to the benefit of our people that we do so. And so I would love the opportunity to do it again. So episode 2.
Yes. Season
Very
2.
cool. Yeah, season 2 of we can't be called reservation dogs. That's taken. But
Yes.
How about
New
Wildcat?
one.
yeah, Wildcat.
Cats out here.
Wow.
So I'll just play the exit, and then you can stay, and I'll officially end it.